In this lecture for Unit 7, we're going to talk about two concepts in our marketing mix variables. It's going to be about pricing and distribution, which is our place. So if you remember, our marketing mix variables include the customer, our people, the product, it's going to be price, which we're going to be talking about in this lecture. It's going to be place, which is our distribution. We're going to be talking about that this week as well. Promotion is our last marketing mix element. Once we have everything put together, we can then look at how we communicate that information with our customer, and that is where the promotional aspects come in. So, in this lecture, we're going to stick to pricing and distribution, our place. To me, pricing is one of the most complex parts of marketing because it involves a lot. It's a little bit about um, what is our fixed and variable costs. We have to look at our pricing objectives. We have to understand the economics we're working with. We have to look at the price threshold for our customer. We also have to consider what our competitors are charging for similar products and or products that would maybe be replacement products, not necessarily competition, but if we were looking to get another product instead, or what we might do instead. So there are a lot of things involved in pricing. We're also going to look at, and you can see this first slide, pricing in a digital world. That makes things a little bit different. So many of us are used to getting products through brick and mortar stores, but over the last probably 10 years, digital has become a way for many of us to shop or at least do comparison pricing. So, a couple of things to think about as we look at pricing and the pricing structure. With digital, we can get that instant pricing. We can get comparisons, and many of us will go online. Even if we might intend to buy a product in a bricks and mortar store, we may go online to do some price comparisons. We can check prices actually at the point of purchase through our mobile phones. We can name a price, and often there are retailers who will meet a price that we might give them. We can get products free in many ways. We can monitor customer behavior and tailor our offers. There are a lot of opportunities in digital, especially with all of the AI technology that allows retailers to monitor customer behavior and tailor those offers. And a lot of us know or have read articles about or seen it in real life, the pricing for airline tickets. And so oftentimes, if I'm buying an airline ticket, I do incognito to look at the price of tickets because I do know that pricing can change if they have my search data. And so I might get a little bit higher price if I don't buy the ticket right at the time I'm investigating. We can give customers access to special prices. I know through my coffee shop, I have wholesale prices for my customers, and I have special pricing for return customers. And we can negotiate prices online, or we can even do that in person. So, a lot of things that happen with pricing. As I said, it's one of the more difficult of the marketing mix variables that we must deal with. So, understanding pricing a little bit, looking at that environment of pricing, we have what we look at as a sharing economy. We can look at renting and borrowing. There are a lot of sites out there that let customers rent products. You can do that online. You can do a little bit of borrowing as well for different products. And we have that sharing economy through Airbnb and Uber and so forth, which has some dynamic pricing built into it, but allows us as regular consumers to kind of shop around and get better deals. So looking at how companies price things, small companies, usually the boss just prices the product. And I know that that's how it works for my coffee bar. I look and I do a lot of figuring my cost of goods. I look at my break-even points. I look at my margins. I look at what competitors are charging. I look at the economy and what's happening in the economy, and I end up setting those prices myself. When you have a larger company, you're going to have many people involved in pricing. And so oftentimes you'll see division or product line managers that look at all the factors that I just named that a small business would look at, and they will bring that information. But a lot of times there's many departments or oversight that happens when you look at how they price products. How should companies price products? And it's not always how it happens, but looking at the consumer pricing psychology. And I mentioned that as one of the factors that we have to consider when we set prices. A lot of companies don't look at that. It's a factor when you look at luxury prices. A lot of times you're paying a lot more for a product than what it's actually worth, but that's how the customer wants to buy that product. They want to have the feeling of exclusivity, that they're part of a niche or small club, if you will, and they expect to pay that higher price. It helps keep other people out and makes the item that they're purchasing more exclusive. Companies should also look at a systematic approach to setting prices, but also to how they're going to adapt or change those prices. Because we all know that prices don't stay static, that they are going to be moving periodically. So when we look at pricing, I said one of the factors in setting a price is to set that pricing objective. So a couple things that we have to look at. The first step is setting that pricing objective. We need to determine the demand for our product. That's going to play a huge part in how we set that price as well. So think about economics and your economics lessons and the laws of demand and supply. Those certainly come into play when we're looking at setting price. We looked at estimating costs. What are the costs? I mentioned fixed and variable costs that have to be analyzed. We look at the competitors' costs and prices and offers, and then we select a pricing method. And finally, we look at that final price. So, what are some of those pricing objectives? Sometimes companies are just in survival mode, so they may set their prices basically to just survive. In other ways, you may look at how do we maximize our current profit? We want to get the most money as we possibly can. Another pricing objective might be maximum market share, and in that case, you may set a relatively low price in order to get the majority of the consumers in a particular market. On the opposite of that, you may look at maximum market skimming, where you may be a first entry into the market and you're going to set a high price and you want to get the most profit from the market as you possibly can. That's going to last and work well if you know that you will be able to maintain as the only company, the only product in the market for a certain amount of time. Once you have other entrants into the market, market skimming doesn't work very well. If you're looking to have a status as a product quality leadership, you definitely need to consider having a bit higher price because many consumers do not associate quality with low price products. There are many other pricing objectives, but these are the major ones that companies consider when they're setting their price. Step two is determining that demand. So, looking at how sensitive your consumers are to the price of the product and looking at those demand curves, surveys, price experiments, statistical analysis, and understanding the price elasticity of demand. In other words, if prices go up, does demand go up as well, or does demand go down? Conversely, if your price goes down, what happens to demand? So you have to consider all of that. And economics definitely comes into play, your laws of economics. So very important. In fact, marketing comes out of the discipline of economics. When we look at estimating costs, we have to look at the fixed versus the variable costs. We have to look at the total costs, and then we have to look at that average cost. And we have to look at the levels of production and what happens when we produce more versus producing less. But that again then goes back into play with our laws of supply and demand and how much supply can we have and what does that do to our demand curves. So a lot of things go into estimating the actual cost of the product. So, looking at estimating those costs, we can look at accumulated production and look at that experience or learning curve. So, we look at that accumulated production and then we look at the cost per unit. For most companies, our costs are going to go down when we are making more the cost per product goes down when we make more products. So there's a certain amount of experience that we have and those the scale, the economies of scale that come into play when we're able to produce more product. We're going to get lower prices for the supplies or the inventory that goes into making that product. Now, what we don't want to do is sit on a bunch of inventory. So again, we need to understand the laws of supply and demand for our particular product. We have to understand that price threshold of our customer. So all of that is going to be very impactful as we look at setting price. We have to look at that target cost, the price less that desired profit margin. Everybody has a profit margin that they want to make off of their products. So that has to definitely come into play when you look at the price and the costs that are associated. And then we have to look at competitors. Firms take competitors' cost, prices, and consumer reactions into account when setting price. So then you select that pricing method. So there are three major considerations in price. You have the cost, which equals your price floor. That's absolutely what you have to charge, the minimum that you have to charge for your product. You have to look at the competitors' prices because that's your orienting point. That's what your consumers are looking at. Well, if I can get the product here for this, why would I pay that much more for another product? What is the value that I'm getting by paying that higher price? And then we have to look at the customer's assessment of those unique features. That is the price ceiling. If your product has something unique that no other product has, that price ceiling can be a little bit higher. So you've got these anchor points that you can look at when you determine how you're going to set that price. So you've got that high price, no possible demand at this higher price. That's your price ceiling. And then you've got the price floor. You won't make a profit if you go below that price floor. A lot of companies do what we call markup pricing. You just add a standard markup to the product's cost. So anything that you come in and you don't have to add anything to it, you're just serving as sort of a pass through. You could have a standard markup. We used to do that. I worked in a retail boutique when I was in high school and college, and we would have products come in, mostly shoes and women's shoes and clothing, and there was a standard markup price to everything that came in. So all the products were differently priced. They were coming from different manufacturers, but we had that standard markup that we would add. I can't even remember what it is now, but I used to receive the inventory and would put the price on it and tag the products and get them out on the showroom floor, if you will. You could then also have a pricing method where you have a target return. So the price yields its target return on the investment that you made. So you've got that unit cost, then you have the desired return, what the money that you want to make off of it, times the capital that you've invested, and then divide that by the unit sales, how many of those products you're going to actually be selling. When we look at pricing, we have to look at break even. So if we're looking at that target return pricing, what is our break even point? On this chart that you see in this lecture, you've got the dollars and you've got sales volume. So the break even would be if we sold 30 units. So you look at break even, you've got your fixed costs, your total costs, you've got total revenue. And then that target profit is somewhere in there between the total costs and the total revenue. So any product that I sell above 30 units is going to impact my total revenue. So you kind of know how many you have to sell. This is helpful when you're looking at and understanding your total market volume and how many potential consumers you might have. The other thing that we have is perceived value pricing, and this is where a lot of luxury products come into play. It's based on the buyer's image of the product. Any kind of support or soft attributes, the reputation. This is where brand equity comes into play. You're willing to pay a lot more for good brand reputation. You're willing to pay more if there's some exclusivity of ownership of the product. You're willing to pay more if there aren't a lot of units out there of the product. The product is something a little bit more rare. So perceived value is definitely a pricing method, and that does have in consideration the consumer pricing psychology. What is that consumer willing to pay for that product? Value pricing or high-low pricing and then going rate pricing are also strategies that companies might use. A lot of companies, Walmart, notorious for that value pricing, and then just going rate. Here's what everybody else is selling it for, so that's what we're going to sell it for as well. And you see that pretty much with like the price of fuel. The other kind of examples that we might have are auction type pricing. I'm not as familiar with that, but I do know a lot of companies use that. I only use it when I'm buying ads on Google or through Meta. When you're buying those digital ads, you can do auction type pricing on that. And we know if any of you have bought anything on eBay, you've seen that auction pricing in play there. Some additional factors to select that final price. You've got to consider the impact of your other marketing activities, any kind of company pricing policies, risks. You definitely want to factor in risks in there and the impact of your price on other things going on in the organization or other products that might already be priced. We do have to adapt our pricing. So a lot of times there are geographical considerations that you would have to consider. And oftentimes you look at it, it comes through discounts. You might get quantity discounts, functional discounts, seasonal discounts, or sometimes you'll get allowances. If you've traded in a car, you've had what we call a trade-in allowance. A promotional allowance is going to reward a dealer for participating in an advertising or sales support program. If you go into Best Buy and you have your heart set on one brand of television, but you walk out with another brand, that Best Buy that you went into may have been participating in some kind of promotional allowance where there were rewards for selling you a different brand of product. So lots of different types of discounts and allowances that help in the pricing of products. Some different promotional pricing types of things. You can see on the screen here, we've all probably participated in one of these at some point in time. Lots of those take place, especially if you're trying to get maybe end of year sales quotas met. You've got some bills to pay, or you need to get rid of inventory. You may participate in some of these promotional pricing strategies. Um, we don't need to talk about that. Price changes. Once you lower a price, it's really hard to get the price high again. So you have to really be considerate of when you raise prices and when you lower prices. So price cuts usually happen when you have too much inventory. Price cuts happen, and sometimes can make consumers feel like they're getting a low quality product. Sometimes they'll wonder what's going on. It's particularly impactful if you have price conscious customers that are really watching pricing, but you need to be really careful about how you raise and lower your prices. Um, when we look at price changes, you do have to understand how your competitors will respond to that. Always important, and if you remember the marketing umbrella that I showed you near the beginning of the course, research. Price is one of those marketing mix variables that is going to require a lot of research on your consumer and research on your competitors, because competitors' pricing is going to be really important, and consumers look at that as well. If you can demonstrate enough added value to a higher price than your competition, and that value is discernible by your consumer, that makes that price difference a little bit easier to handle. Okay, let's go on and look at marketing channels. So, marketing channels are how consumers get products. So, you have your manufacturer, you have your consumer. Products can either go direct right from the manufacturer to the end user consumer, or they can be indirect. And you could have channel intermediaries that help facilitate getting the product from the manufacturer to the end user consumer. The thing that you have to remember is that everybody in the marketing channel who touches that product between the manufacturer to the end user consumer needs to get paid. So that will ultimately add to the price of that product. So you must consider that when you're determining how you're going to distribute your product. So channel members serve many different functions. So channel members include wholesalers, retailers, and brokers. Those are your primary channel members. They have various functions. They gather information, they look at communications, they can help initiate purchasing. They can help with negotiation of price or how you're going to get possession of the product. They can finance inventories. A lot of times they will assume all of the risk of taking that product from a manufacturer and getting it out to the end user consumers. They can often store or move products. Now, that's important to a manufacturer if the manufacturer doesn't want to carry a big inventory of products. So, a lot of great functions that channel members provide in getting products distributed. This is the marketing flow for forklift trucks. You have the physical flow, you have the title flow, the payment flow, the information flow, and the promotion flow. Lot of things that transpire in getting from the supplier or the manufacturer to that end user consumer. So, looking at the role of those marketing channels, again, a zero level channel is direct, right from the manufacturer to the end user consumer. You could have one, two, or three level channels. So, you could have the wholesaler, retailer, and a broker, or you could just have a wholesaler right to the end user consumer. You could have a wholesaler and a retail, or just a manufacturer, retailer, consumer. So lots of different options, and it just depends on the complexity of your product and who that end user consumer actually is. So, identifying some channel alternatives, you can look at exclusive distribution where you're only allowing one type of organization to sell your product. You could have selective distribution, or you could have intensive distribution where your product is widely available in many, many different outlets. So, this is a good example. You see the steel chainsaw, why the world's number one selling brand of chainsaw is not sold at Lowe's or Home Depot. So if you have some kind of selective or exclusive distribution where you know that your product can only be purchased from a particular retailer, and a lot of times that happens when you need to customize a product or you want to have really good attention to detail in the selling of the product. So, looking at the terms and responsibilities of those channel members, a lot of times they're setting pricing policy, they're looking at the conditions of the sale and just the different territories. Lots of things that transpire in making sure that they're representing the product well and they are an easy interface to get that product sold to the end user consumer. Couple things when you're evaluating your channel alternatives, economics and control. So you want to look at those direct marketing channels, might be the internet or telemarketing or retail stores. Indirect channels might be distributors, and then direct sales channels would be value-added partners or a particular sales force. So, some channel management decisions, training channel members is big, evaluating them, modifying them, and then selecting those channel members. If you're going global, that's going to add a whole new level to everything that you're doing because you'll need probably different channel members in each country. It may not be possible to utilize the same channel members you would use in one country, also in another country. Okay, so things get a little complicated here when we look at channel integration and the different systems. So you can have a conventional marketing channel, a vertical marketing system, or a horizontal marketing system. So if you looked at a conventional marketing channel, you would have different channel partners looking to maximize their own profits. So if you looked at a vertical system, that's where everyone is unified. If you looked at a horizontal marketing system, people are unrelated, but they're working together to take advantage of an opportunity. So, an example of a vertical system would be like Apple computers. Everyone in the system is unified. You've got Apple manufacturing the products, the Apple stores, all of that works together. If you looked at a horizontal system, that would be like the Starbucks inside a Target. They're unrelated, but they are working together. We're going to look at a conventional system up at the top there. That would be an example might be Procter and Gamble. Procter and Gamble produces the products. The wholesaler might be McKesson, who sells them out, some of those Procter and Gamble products out to healthcare systems. And then you may have a retailer such as a Walmart or a Kroger who is also then selling to the end user consumer. So that would be a conventional marketing channel system. So looking at vertical systems, okay, let's take a look at a few vertical systems. If you had a corporate vertical marketing system, you would have single ownership. So that would be an example of Apple. They own and manufacture the product and they sell it through their stores. If you had it administered, let's look at an administered VMS. That would be Walmart. They're selling a lot of different products. They sell to all different things to end user consumers. If we looked at a contractual VMS, you might have a wholesaler sponsored voluntary chain, and that would be True Value. True Value makes products, they sell them in those True Value stores, but True Value can also sell other products. If you had a retailer cooperative, Ace Hardware is a retailer cooperative. All of the Ace stores come together and they have purchasing power to buy the products that go into the each independently owned Ace Hardware store. And then if you looked at franchise organizations, those are fairly straightforward. You know, McDonald's is a huge franchise. Subway, I think, is one of the biggest. Subway sandwiches is one of the biggest franchises. You have the franchise company, which sets all the standards. They have all the product. They do all the distribution. The franchise owner gets the system. They buy all the inventory from that franchise organization and they have to pay a percent. I've had friends that have owned franchises and you have to set up your bank account and that money comes out whether you've made money that month or not. The franchise organization is going to get their cut of it. And sometimes it's pretty steep. So you have to pay fees for marketing and a lot of other things, but the system works and the brand equity and the marketing that goes along with it is a lot of times what makes it so incredibly valuable. If we look at e-commerce and m-commerce, some of the marketing practices in e-commerce, you have websites that help transact or facilitate the sale of products. I don't know anybody who hasn't bought products online. It's just an easy way to not only search for products, price comparison, but to then buy those products. You can have pure click versus brick and click companies. So a pure click, you can only buy it online. Brick and click, you could buy it online or you could buy it in the store. A lot of times you can even buy it online and pick it up at a store. So there are those types of organizations as well. If we look at m-commerce, mobile devices, a lot of people buy things through those mobile devices. Here's an example, like Starbucks has their app, so does Dunkin' Donuts. You can buy things through the app. You can pick them up at the store, but the apps and the online mobile purchase help you to not only buy the product, but you're going to get those promotional discounts. And anytime there's any kind of sale or promotional information, that's going to come to you as well. So a lot of information, pricing and distribution. I want you to know that if you have questions, please reach out to me. And I know there's a lot more information in your textbook. This is just a broad overview in the lecture. And you have some videos and things that go along with Module 7 that will help you understand the concepts.